because there's something about the devotional activity of being of attending to your own heart and soul, of making space for that, whatever you call your higher power or God, whatever name you use, that for me, just that devotional time is like an act of self-love.
You're listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author Sarah Boxx. We focus on the mantra, no labels, no limits, no excuses. And now, without further ado, please welcome your commanding coach with plenty of chutzpah and heart, Sarah Boxx.
Welcome back to the No Labels, No Limits podcast, everyone. You know, this is where we explore stories that inspire transformation. We invite you to break free from labels and limits. And also, we're going to talk about topics that help us dive deeper into our own personal journeys. And you know, if you've listened to me before, you know I'm a fan of the Enneagram. You're going to love today's guest because of that. And so let me just introduce her briefly. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Reverend Nhien Vuong, a former Stanford law attorney turned Enneagram expert and spiritual guide. Nice combo. Nhien is the founder of Evolving Enneagram, which is an organization dedicated to fostering spiritual growth through the Enneagram. An author and international presenter, Nhien's work bridges rigorous intellectual inquiry with deep spiritual insights. It's a different kind of blend to bring to the Enneagram oftentimes. So I just think that's great. So let's formally welcome Nhien to the podcast. Good afternoon, Nhien.
Hello, good afternoon. It's so great to be here.
Now, correct me, am I butchering your name or am I close?
I thought it was amazing. You did an amazing job with my name. So, yes.
Well, that's good. I try to get it, but you know, sometimes my brain just goes, what?
Yeah.
So I'll start it and then I'll have a different kind of something else will come out. But I do love languages and just how I can't trust what's written because my brain wants to change it into how I would do that in English or Spanish, right? It's not helpful.
Yes.
So, it's not helpful. So I just thought, okay, let me get it. Let me just try and see how it goes. Anyway, but I did want to start, you know, you have this interesting story where you had a turning point that shifted you from your practice of law into embracing your spiritual teaching and working with the Enneagram. So can we start from there? Because I think transformation is always an interesting place to start.
Yeah. I'd love to share a little bit about that. I think to properly share about that, I might have to go back even further to share that as background. I am a Vietnamese refugee. I was born in Vietnam, grew up in Southern California, but I think when we fled Vietnam, we just hit the ground running. Our family was very strict when it came to academics, and there was always this sense when we were kids, we're like all my siblings and I looked at each other and we're like, did you think you had to be a doctor or a lawyer and nothing else? Yeah, basically that. Did mom and dad ever say that? No, they didn't explicitly say that. We just all believed it. It was just this crazy, by their withholding of affection and approval, we were just all clamored for their approval. And so all of us were like massive overachievers, 4.0 or higher in high school, all 5 kids. And I was the bad kid, the black sheep, which is funny, right? I go to Stanford Law School, but I just sucked in science and math. And if you know anything about the Asian families, it's like, oh, be a doctor. The doctor is number one, it's lawyer.
Oh, good. You got to do science and math to be a doctor.
So there I was, this pathetic young child was like, what will I do with my life if I can't be a doctor? I guess I'll be a lawyer. I mean, it was basically how it went. But looking back, I laugh at it now. I was in a lot of pain then. Just I struggled a lot in my childhood and always felt like the outsider. Again, my older sister became the doctor, so she was like the golden child. Here I am looking up at her, But when I went to undergrad, I actually came up on the major of philosophy. And so that's more me. Like my whole life, I was the kid was like, Why, Mom? Why? And I read voraciously as a child, everything I could get my hands on, spirituality, religion, astrology, esoteric things. And I realized looking back, I was always questing for the meaning of life, like since I was little. And so, but I was in this family that was like, gun it and go and make a freaking living. So as a philosophy major, as you might already know, there aren't a lot of like philosophy jobs out there. So when I was an undergrad, I actually had a conversation with my professor. He's like, God, you're so good at this, you're made for this, but I got to tell you, the life of a philosophy professor is really hard. And if you have a chance to go to law school, I think you should go. And that was kind of pivotal. I'm like, okay, I was just a kid in a way. And I was like, oh, and I respected him. Like, okay, I'll become a lawyer. That's how much thought I put into the decision, really. And so I was just fortunate. My scores were high and I got into Stanford, right? And so I'm setting that up to say that it didn't feel like a calling. It wasn't like I knew I'm supposed to be a lawyer and now suddenly this change happens. It's that I did that and I just didn't know what I was doing, but I felt trapped. As soon as I started as a lawyer, I was like, well, I have $100,000 debt from law school. What am I going to do with my life? I can't even type. I remember sitting crying in my office. I can't even get another job. I'm not qualified to do anything else. And it wasn't until I hit a bottom in my life, had a spiritual awakening. And in that awakening, I was drawn to find like spiritual teachings. And I realized something profound, like that beginning journey of like questing for the meaning of life. When I started meditating, I was like, oh, there's this saying that what we're seeking for isn't really the meaning of life, but the experience of being alive. And when I started meditating, I had that experience. And from that experience, I had this calling one day that like, you will give people this inside out experience of fulfillment and wholeness that you received. And that was the beginning of my call to ministry. Yeah. So
you mentioned
a long story.
That's great.
Yeah.
I just want to reflect on a couple of things. One is, how old were you when you came here?
1.5.
Okay. So you're first generation.
Yes.
And I just want to stand back and go, for everybody goes, I can't do it. It's hard. I'm thinking, okay, did you speak English when you came here? No.
Right.
So, and English is not necessarily a super easy language to learn. So I'm just sitting here going, what a slacker. She can't speak English. She's the first generation. She gets into Stanford.
Thank you.
That's huge right there. So you've already met your parents' expectations. Mm-hmm. It must have been really challenging. Here's your shining star sister, and you're going, I'm not feeling like it. I'm not feeling it, but I'm going to keep going, right? That's the expectation. But to some degree, just the fact that your parents expected more from all of you it's like you've got a high bar to head towards, whether it fit for you or not. But then making a change, that courage that it takes to go, oh, not me, that's a big deal. That's hard to do. And a lot of people don't do it. So, but you talked about when you went into the silence of meditation, that's when other things opened up for you. So a lot of folks will say, I don't know how to meditate. I can't meditate. I'm doing it wrong. So can you talk just a little bit about that experience?
Yeah. Well, when I first began, I will have to say, this is probably not selling it very well, but all I did was cry. When I first began meditating, I was like, oh, this is why we don't sit down. And then I've come to learn that, there I was running, it's almost like our whole family did that. We hit the ground running And once we finally just stopped, any of us, right, just like stop, like all of that caught up. And I realized I had so much grief inside of me. I was carrying like generations of pain. Like, in fact, I realized I was carrying the pain of my whole family system because no one else in my family had stopped by then, right? And so that, and I remember going down inside, and because of my childhood experience of feeling so like the other, and I'm getting emotional talking about it because it's like, oh yes, this is why you teach inclusivity, Nhien, because like you're from your own woundedness around feeling like the other, that I first meditated because I thought, oh, I'm broken, but I can fix it if I like do this thing people are teaching me, right? And so I came from the perspective of thinking there's something wrong with me that I need to fix. Like I can't figure out my life, right? And because even though on the outside things had gone well, so I'll go back and share that when I hit bottom, I actually started a 12-step program of recovery, and relationship addictions, all the kinds of like making other people my higher power. Like I had it. And that was the beginning of my spiritual awakening. And so when I went inside, I realized that, at first, the first feelings were anger and sadness. And so like all the reasons why people don't want to sit, right? And I was so scared that that's all I would find there. But thankfully, I had guides, other people who had been there who said, just keep going, and so stay with it. And as I stayed with it, I literally, I had a moment where it lifted and I really felt like there was light inside of me. And I was like, oh, that's what people are talking about, right? This is not just the self-help affirming, I am wonderful. I am it's like an actual experience of light inside of myself, and so that became it's a felt experience and point of power, that is the decision making. But I realized that to go back to answer your question about like meditation, I don't know anyone who's good at it. So don't stop because you're not, right? But also my particular practice was of being in the silence. And I think that there's a good crutch we can have by doing guided meditations first. So that's what I would offer for those who are like learning meditation. But I think that there's something to the power of setting the intention to just do it anyway, even if your thoughts are going a mile a minute, because there's something about the devotional activity of being of attending to your own heart and soul, of making space for that, whatever you call your higher power or God, whatever name you use, that for me, just that devotional time is like an act of self-love, So yeah.
Yeah, it's powerful. Very powerful. And sometimes you do cry.
I still do cry, but I didn't just cry it all out.
No, I think that's the fantasy. Like, okay, I'll do this, I'll get through it, and then I'm good forever, right? It's like, sure, until the next time something goes. I think that's more something else that I could attend to. Yeah. I could pay attention to, I could set intention around, I could let it be.
Yes.
Just be with it. You've written a book. Yes. I want to, this may be an abrupt change, but I really would like to spend time talking about your book. Because you talk about many things in there, the transformation power of recognizing our inherent worthiness. And you kind of started tapping into that a little bit when you were talking about meditation, right? When you recognize that. So let's start by, who did you write the book for?
Wow, what a great question. Well, I mean, if I'm deeply honest, I wrote the book for me. I mean, for people like me, maybe. And by that, I mean someone who's seeking for a deeper life, and whose spirituality doesn't fit into any particular religious box. Where it's a really individualized, direct experience they're seeking, not something given to them or imposed upon them. Someone like spiritually curious or open, if you will. And yeah, I think, and also, I even mention it in the book that I mentioned my lifelong loneliness. I didn't use that word earlier, but growing up as I did, I was lonely in my family. I was incredibly lonely. I thought I was the loneliest person in the entire world. How would I know? Because I was too lonely. I didn't have anyone to talk to or ask about that, if others were lonelier than me. But there I was, isolated, and I had books. So I read so voraciously, and in the books probably saved my life, because in it I was like, well, there are a few people who might think like me, philosophers and poets, and so for me, the book, I call it, it wants to be your anamkara, your soul friend, to be there, to be like, you're not alone, you're not crazy for thinking this, like it's that kind of like spirit of like, I see you, right? And a lot of times in my Enneagram teachings, there would be people who were like, wow, like, I mean, called out, like what I posted about their type, they're like, I feel overly seen. It's like, not just a little seen, but I think that piece of offering that to others who might not have access to a one-on-one coaching session with people, or their financial because of where they live or something like that, but be able to reach anyone at any time. I think that's whom I'm writing to, not necessarily the Enneagram aficionado. It could be people who have never met the Enneagram yet, Yeah, so.
Well, what you just said about being seen, and I think, sometimes you read a book and it just strikes you in a way that you never anticipated. You thought, okay, it'd be a good read. I might learn something here, but all of a sudden you feel like that book is speaking to you because of where you are in your life at that moment. And books are powerful.
Mm.
So how did you structure the book? Like if I picked it up, what would my experience be?
Yeah. So the book is basically, there's an introduction, how to use the book, which is really just invitational. It's not like you must use it this way. And 9 principles, 9 practices, 9 prayers, and then 40 activations, which are really, I like that, it's like they're invitations, but basically each of the 40 days or 40 weeks of invitations are based on like a theme for the day, like self-forgiveness might be a theme. And then there are invitations based on your number. And the difference between this and, say, a lot of the other Enneagram material that I was seeing is that, number one, you see all the 9 types. There's some books out there where you just have yours. And there's some perspective building in when people read about all of the 9 types. But then also the invitation is always to break free from the fixation of type. It's not like, because you're this way, because the book is founded on the idea that you are much more than your type, that you are not, in fact, you are represented by the wholeness of the symbol of the circle of the Enneagram, not one point on the edge of the Enneagram. And so based on that, the idea is that by grappling with, contemplating, reflecting on each of these 40 invitations, that there's an opening that can arise for you to step out of the identification with your particular personality type structure. So yeah, just briefly, that's, I can go back to the 9 principles are things like, it starts with you are not your type. That's principle 1.
I do think that's important because sometimes the Enneagram can just become like a parlor game. Like, this is my type, and which can be fun, but it also can be intimidating if you don't know enough that it's not just that. It might be that and something else. So I like your inclusivity, that you are somewhere in this circle, and it's not a fixed point on the outside, because we are more than just a single type.
Yeah.
So talk about the 9 principles.
Yeah. So you're not your type, but then if you're not your type, why learn about type, right? So, and so in that, it's this idea that your personality is a portal into your soul. So the way I symbolize it is you think about the circumference of the circle of the Enneagram. We stay on the surface of being when we're operating at personality, and not only on the surface, but we look outward toward the world. So we focus our energies outward, trying, like for the type 6, for instance, trying to build security in the outer world, focused outwardly, and yet no amount of financial accumulation or no amount of affirmation from your partner makes the 6 go, oh, I feel safe and secure now, so it's endless, right? So all of us have a way. Of Course in Miracles teaches that the ego's mantra is seek but do not find. And so this idea that each personality type system is uniquely designed to seek, but seek out in the world what will never satisfy, what will never fulfill. And so that as the premise, then we go inward, right? So some of the so I'm starting to talk about the journey of the book, but going back to the
that's perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Because that helps people see, okay, this is, I'm giving an example. Yes, I've learned how my position, if you will, how that influences how I look outward, but not necessarily how I look inward, unless I'm looking at what my blind spots are, which is also can be a limiting way to think. It's not a soul way of looking. So that, just take us however you want to take us, because you've got me there paying attention.
Yes. So if you can continue with this journey and this symbolism, it's almost like then once you go into the center, and remember that all numbers are equidistant from the center. So that's especially important for like the 1s and the 4s who feel particularly bad. Mine's the worst. It's like all of us are equally distant. And I symbolically, again, like the center for me is spirit, by whatever name, right? You could tell it your higher truth, your inner wisdom. But this idea that through contemplative practice, and that's where I offer 9 contemplative practices in the book for those who are new. Like through contemplative practice, it's like you break the shell of the fixation of the type that allows it to move within and open to the fullness of its own wholeness. For instance, a 9 who might have a lot of stories about it's not okay to shine, I don't really matter. But what if your soul, at the deepest level of being, you are being called to speak out, whether it's activism or something, and so there's something nagging at you. I don't think it's not about making the 9 energy wrong. It's about seeing when the soul wants something more and the personality confines it. And so in that moment, then it's like the opening to the space of that inner world fortifies us, energizes us, and fuels and inspires us in a way where moving out from the center rather than from the circumference, the 9 is able then to embrace qualities within the entire Enneagram symbol, right? So a lot of 9s have issues. It's a little bit cliche, but with the 8 energy, where the 9's like, me, angry, I'm just a nice person, right? But a little, but what are they shutting down? Some of their power. And no wonder you get sleepy. It's exhausting. If you're pushing down your anger all the time, you're going to go to sleep, right? You're going to need a nap. And so, but realizing and making space for the embrace of that, to then come into a greater knowing of your wholeness, which includes, 9s will always have this immense gift and capacity of seeing diverse and holding diverse perspectives. What a gift. Bring that with some fire in the world, and what do we have, right? But use that gift and just sit and watch TV and go, oh, great, that's a great perspective, and so is that. And so, right, there's something about the power that a lot of 9s will miss when they don't own the wholeness of the Enneagram, that especially the quality that their soul might be calling them. Because I say that because I don't believe, some people are like, oh, you're every type, and that's weird to me. I don't think you're every type. You're one type, but you have access to all the points on the Enneagram because you are human, because it describes our humanity, right? And I would also add our divinity. Yeah. So
Talk
yeah.
a little bit more about that. I mean, because I'm interested in how you link the two, because I know sometimes folks are reluctant to do that.
Yeah.
But it makes perfect sense. So how do you bring that together?
Yeah. So I'll first say the reluctance. I mean, it felt like a brave act for me to out myself, right? Because in a world where especially intellectuals are like, oh, only idiots, believe in, like there's that, I mean, like that faith is blind. And yet, for me, how do I bring it together? So as you heard already, like I don't really, having had a direct experience of the divine as love, as wholeness, I am not at all attached to whatever name people call this thing called God. And so I think that helps people where they're like, okay, for me, God is divine light, and I will never use the word God in my life. Like I have people in my community who are exactly that. And for some, it's spirit, it's whatever works for them as something being bigger than them, bigger than their current consciousness. And for some, they still say it's mine, like my higher power. So allowing people space to define what spirit even is for them is like a beginning step on this. So to just like it's what you define as that. But the way that I relate it is that just from I'm very open in my book about saying, from my perspective, though, I'm going to be in integrity about what my perspective is. And Unity happens to believe that we were born in original blessing, not in original sin. So we are actually fundamentally whole and perfect, irrespective of what we believe. And I think that's super important, because I've heard in some spiritual traditions, the reason they don't teach meditation is like, if you are intrinsically sinful, why go inside? Right? I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. Like you have to go outside to some law to keep you in line. Right? So this fundamental belief in people. And so this book takes that perspective of assuming your wholeness. Like you don't need to fix anything. It's not broken, but it's more about allowing the emergent aspect of the soul to continue to express and not be hampered by the ego censoring and limitation of it. Is kind of how I hold it. So that idea that our wholeness in a way and our spirit are the same thing, that the way that spirit expresses through us to show up as our potential in this life, that's what I mean by the soul, right? It's the unique expression of spirit in my particular incarnation, if you will.
Yep. Yeah. That makes sense. But it also, I just get the sense when I've had a couple of different like visual things as you're talking. So when you were talking about going inward, it almost felt like me going into that grounded earth energy and then going up, right? Like if you think of the chakras, that whole thing like that. And then also a veil that can come over us when we don't recognize our inner soul connection.
Yeah.
It just seems hazy. Because you're describing, like what you're taking in is all the outside. Yes. These are the rules, or this is how you should be, kind of thing. Have you had feedback on your book?
Well, yes, I've had endorsers. Russ Hudson, whom I consider the preeminent master teacher of the Enneagram globe now, actually wrote a foreword to the book. So that was amazing. And he had such beautiful things to, how we all want to be seen, but we want to be loved for the reasons we think we should be loved. Like there's this, oh, you really saw the book. Like he wrote about compassion. He wrote about how it's pointing people in what he considers the right direction, which is the transformative, like with the roots of the Enneagram. Like he wrote so many beautiful things. Another teacher I admire is Robert Holden. Robert Holden is more known in the UK. He's been a keynote speaker at the global Enneagram conferences, and he wrote that it's a masterpiece. I mean, so yeah, people I really respect who know this, but whom I believe are actually teaching transformation and teaching compassion and love. Robert Holden is all about love. And so I really treasure his work. I think that's a good way of putting it. Like I treasure him and his work. So that's been amazing. Yeah, but you know, the book comes out April 7th. So we've had pre-sales, but it's available for pre-order
now. You don't have to wait. You can pre-order.
Yes, yes. And I'm delighted that people have already. And I'm actually April 12th and 13th, I'm offering a book facilitator training for folks who are interested in using the book. And I can kind of go back a little bit to talk about another piece that I feel is super relevant, which is community. Yes. Okay. Okay. So even going back to the principles, one of the principles is from the Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh, we inter-are. And this idea that in American culture, we see ourselves as very independent. But as a very famous American author, Stephen Covey, wrote, you know, the highest ideal, he taught, like we have this move from dependence to independence, but he said that what we miss is there's a third, which is interdependence. And interdependence is actually more mature than independence. And what makes it more mature, he wrote, the fact that maturity recognizes reality. And the reality is that we do nothing on our own. And so interdependence actually reflects reality more than the American value of independence. And so I remember reading that and going, whoa, right? Because as an Enneagram Type 3, I was like, I'm doing it alone. You know, look at me. I just believe it. And I can do it, right? Like no idea. You know, I had this idea like I did my life on my own. Only to realize, oh yeah, and your dad paid for college, right? And like I just like conveniently just neglected to see these aspects of how life has collaborated together to meet my needs as well as all our needs. As you know, part of this growth has been really understanding that. And I'll even go back to my own journey. When I started meditating, my first realization is I am whole. And my second realization is that I am one. I am one with all. That was like what I felt from this girl who thought she was alone in the world to feeling a sense of oneness and unity and love and affection for others. That arose from within me. That inspired me to become a minister. Like it wasn't like you should do this, you could help people. It was like it was from the inside out. And so one of the principles in the book is that wholeness is not individual, it's communal. And there's a power to community, to supporting our healing, because our lives are like bound up in it. And so one aspect to the book is an invitation to journey, if you can. It's made for me to be your companion, but for you to also be among companions to do this together, not just for support, but you know, community, people. Humans trigger each other so we can open up more wounds to heal. So, and that's what we do in our communities. Lots of wounds to heal. So,
you know, but when you approach that with love, it's not that scary. You know, oftentimes I'll think, and a couple of the guys I work with, it's just, wow, that was interesting. Glad I have someone along on this road with me. You know, it's kind of like, okay, got it. But there's bigger opening as a result of that. Able to connect more. So your offering is to help people know how to facilitate the communities to work alongside with your book?
Yes. So yeah, and the reason for it in part is, I will later in the year, I've been asked for years to do this, but I will have by fall a contemplative, oh, we haven't even used that word yet, but that's very important, contemplative Enneagram certification program by fall. But this thing in April is like a mini version of that, to say, hey, you know what? You might not even know the Enneagram that well. You might just be someone who wants to journey with it, but I want to give you enough tools so that you can look at, we'll talk about facilitator leadership bias. We'll talk about contemplative practice being integral to it, so that it's not a discussion group in that ordinary sense where people are arguing viewpoints with one another, but it holds space for presencing each other's sharing. Those are some of the principles that come from the community that I lead in Evolving Enneagram. And so learning that, and learning also some principles I've learned over the years. And another thing we haven't talked about is the CPE groups I lead are contemplative practices and the Enneagram groups. And so those have been going on weekly for over 7 years now. So drawing from that, looking at, how do types move in and out of community? So I'm going to explore a little bit of that. So those are some of the elements to support someone who's just like, I'm excited about the book. I want to review this book with others or journey with others, and but I want a few skills for that. Yeah. So
that's an interesting. You talk about how different types move in and out of community. Can you just give a little taste of that? Because I know personally, just being a 5, my moving in and out of communities can sometimes appear abrupt to others. It can.
Yes.
But it's not in the least. I mean, it's not. It's like, I've been giving this a lot of thought. Whoops, I forgot to communicate it.
Great. That you know that, though.
I can own it. I mean, I own it now. It's like going, yeah, you can do better. But but it's true. Or it can be true. It's not always so. I mean, the more awareness, the less it's so. For me, you don't have to, like you're saying, you're not just stuck somewhere on the periphery or on the edge of the Enneagram. But talk a little bit about what that means, because one of the things you used earlier was like when people can know the different types, that's why you don't just focus on these boxing people in. It seemed to me also that there's a compassion or an understanding that can emerge from that lets people just kind of go, okay, going back to what you said, like, I'm not alone. Other people also experience this, or they might have experienced that other type, like your example of the 9 being a little like not wanting to be like the 8 in their ability to express anger.
Yeah.
So how do people, just a couple of them, how they might experience, or people might experience them moving in and out of groups?
Yes. Well, I would. So one additional level of complexity in the Enneagram are the instinctual variants or subtypes. So I have found that could play a major role in how people come to groups. Like, for instance, just patterns that I've noticed, nothing that I'm going to, like, maybe not statistically relevant data, but, but for instance, I've noticed that if you're, whatever number you are, self-preservation dominant people usually don't start a transformation group unless something broke in their lives, right? Like, there's a penchant for conserving what is, and what draws them out to a community that is clearly about transformation is usually a health concern, right? Or a divorce, something like that. And I've noticed, so there's this like opening, and there's this ripeness in that area. But what I found is there's an initial hurdle where I've noticed even that it might not look like anything's happening for the self-pres dominance. It's like I've just kind of noticed this pattern that it doesn't, so there's like a step, there's an interesting thing where it feels like a line, and the facilitator should know that, right? But then it's almost like I tell them, when the couch here, when we were meeting in person, we're on Zoom now, when this couch here feels like the couch at your home, you will never leave. And that's the joke that the self-pres, they were the least enthusiastic in the beginning, but they're the ones who stay the longest. And just recognizing that pattern. And then it's almost like nothing was happening. Then boom, suddenly like they're another person. And everyone's like, who are you? And across the way, it's just an amazing thing to watch. Noticing I'm sexual dominant. And some of them, they're so excited, they're so passionate, and there's all this excitement, energy, but the sustainability, especially if there's sexual, just watching the sustainability of that, right? It can be questioned. And so the invitation for the facilitator to know certain things that could be clues of like, how does their Enneagram type keep them from getting the full benefit of it? But if they're informed ahead of time about some of these aspects, that might be something to look at for them around staying power, or, and then the facilitator can also know a little bit about, if you have a room full of like sevens, you might want to vary up the curriculum. You might want to let them choose. Like if I have one-on-ones with a 7, you can bet I'm not saying, oh yes, do centering prayer every day, twice a day for 20 minutes. You can bet I'm going, here are the 3 potential practices you can do, and let them choose. And understand that we're meeting an important need for them to feel like they still have options, choices for themselves, some freedom within it, right? Because that's compassion. It's not saying, well, Nhien, I think when people first meet the Enneagram, they're like, the non-compassionate view is, oh, you're a 3? Oh, we're going to deprive you of any affirmation now, right? Because you shouldn't need it if you're going to be more evolved. And I think that's just cruel, right? Like a 6, it was like, we're going to take away all your security and see if you grow, as opposed to like a gentle approach that says, I'm going to meet you part way here. Like, I'm going to invite you in with the things that right now you feel you need, right? There's something to that, to the honoring of that. And so if we just know that this is an act of love, as a 5, I could tell you, that early on when I led these groups, I noticed, I was like very invitational. As I started to embrace my feelings, like I made space for like, all feelings are welcome. When you come in the door, please, if you just had a difficult conversation with a loved one, a diagnosis, like don't leave that at the door. I invite you to bring it in, right? And so, of course, like, 4s were like loving it in the groups, but I noticed that something was happening with my head types. I noticed that in the beginning, even though we're this meditation group, they kept raising their hands, asking questions.
Like, can you explain to me why we're doing this? What's the value? I just like a little more background information on this.
It was so great. So I realized I had to be in discernment as a facilitator, where I answered some questions, but not all. But I could use it as a teaching point, right? Where it's like I could just intuitively sense like they need these answered. It's just like
I think sometimes it isn't even like, even when you're saying the 6 insecurity, it isn't that they have to have it, but knowing that they could have it if they wanted to have it. Like, I'll give you a break. I don't need my questions answered because I know that if I don't get them with you, I can go outside and research. I can get answers, or I'll pull you, or I'll talk to you on the side, right? If I don't know the rest of the group. But I just think letting people know that you as the facilitator aren't afraid to go there with someone. Just like, hey, we're here. It's safe. I see you. But no, this space is for you to grow in, not for be coddled in necessarily. And your gentleness and spirit of heart, I think, come through really clear just in this conversation alone.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. No, it's just so precious. What I was going to add in that is that for me to be in true integrity, in authentic relationship with people, in that moment, like if someone does something, I have to admit, like sometimes 7s, I was like, just sit down already. Just, like, of course, on Zoom, it's a little different now, but I don't see it as they're wrong. If I'm triggered, like if I was a 9 and facilitator triggered by someone's anger, if I'm triggered, I have to really look at myself. It's like, well, Nhien, are you too duty bound? You probably don't do what you want all the time, right? And so you're triggered. Those triggered 7s just doing whatever they want. It's true, you know?
It's a valuable mirror, though. For me, when it's like, wow, what a great opportunity to grow. Sarah, they're being them.
Yes, exactly.
So
Like loving them grows my love for that part of me.
exactly.
Yeah. And so over the years, it's like that love I told you opened up. It's like it just keeps growing. It just like I feel like I keep softening, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, like there's been moments where I even went on vacation in Chicago recently, and it's like I was aware of strangers and what was happening for them, and like my heart, like I just felt connected, you know, just and I was like, oh my God, and you're just gonna be blubbering, you know, just like it's like, what's happened? I mean, you used to be called cold ice queen in college, you know, and now you're gonna cry. But I love it. I mean, I love it because it is softness toward, I think is maybe just toward softness has really been a gift of offering it to others and receiving it for myself within myself at deeper and deeper levels to where unity becomes a lived and real thing in my life. It's so amazing. Yeah, not perfect, you know, I still, and at the same time, it's like love, the circle of love even starts to encircle the imperfections, right? So it's like, oh, you were distracted. Oh yeah. And then love circles that. Anais Nin, I think, said, I live my life in ever widening circles of, of love. And I feel like that's kind of what life has become. Yeah. So.
Which means it's possible for everybody.
Yes, because if it's possible for me.
Oh, that wasn't the point I was making.
No, but I kind of feel that way.
It's so funny. It's so funny. But I mean, it's like once you get that, it's like, okay, if it's possible for one, it's possible for all.
Yes.
The point is, we all are similar. We have different experiences. We bring different things forth through other lives in our history and our ancestry. But the opportunity to be more loving inward and outward is there for all of us.
Yes. Yes.
Which is why I think your book is exciting.
Thank you.
And I don't, this episode will probably come out later in January of 25, maybe early February. But whenever you listen to this, listeners, what I like to say is, don't wait, run to your online pre-order store right now and get the book, because come in April when it releases, you'll be one of the first ones to have it. But I really love what you're offering with the facilitator training for book clubs and people who want to be able to do a journey with others.
Thank you so much. May I add something here?
Yes.
I just want to say that the invitation that you made when we first connected to listen to some of your podcasts, I thought dutifully that I would listen to one, and I started binging this podcast, listening to your compassionate interview, your depthful and compassionate interviewing. I was just so excited to be here today. I mean, the depth of your own journey, which is so obvious, so like lived and apparent and oozing toward everyone you interviewed, that I just needed to say that.
You know what, that's so sweet of you. And I think why your way you speak resonates with me is because I recognize, like, there's that inherent, I like to say I'm a perfect eavesdropper, because I'm really interested in people. I don't use it to turn and talk to them or anything, but I'm just aware. And I can feel energy and all of that stuff. But I just think people are endlessly fascinating, period. That everybody's got a story. And when we can get out of our own ways and go, what's interesting here that I might not know about? I have been amazed by people, and like in the middle of conversations with someone that I'm thinking, I'm not sure we're going to connect on this. And all of a sudden they'll say something and go, that's why we're on the call together today. So I really appreciate your compliment, but it's also for me like a passion thing for me to get to meet people. And evidently my mom said ever since I was a little kid and walked, if we were at a restaurant, I'd walk up to strangers and start talking to them at their tables. So I guess I've just taken it forward. Was there a particular episode that spoke to you?
After I told you,
I know that's an unfair thing to say.
But I will, just to honor this particular person. I even took a screenshot of it. Beyond the Pitch. This is episode 373. It's with Lizzie Freudman. And what I liked about it is I've been telling this to people. What I liked about it was the opening clip that you did, which is basically that marketing shouldn't be fear-based, that she was against fear-based marketing. I'm like, yes, this is what I've been trying to, like that. How do you build a world like that is grounded in this knowing of ourselves when like even the advertising to them like is based on the deprivation of you buy this now or it's going to go away. I've always had an issue with that. So I loved all the things she had to say around not using fear-based advertising, or a scarcity-based advertising in your marketing. Yeah.
I so agree with you, because there's enough for everybody. And if you have to make someone afraid to take action, I'm not sure I want to hang out with that person or what they're selling. It's kind of like, but it also makes you jaded after a while. Once you see enough of it, you just go, rah, 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 you'll be back in my inbox in a week with the same offer. It's all good. But it does key in people's sympathetic nervous system. And I think and we know that. We do know that. We know when we say, hey, this is going away, people start feeling that scarcity thing come up. And this is just me speaking, so all marketers, don't be all grumpy about this, but I think that it can sometimes be, disingenuous, one, but also that it takes advantage of just being honest with people and saying, you know what, this is what is available now. Here's why I think you would benefit from it. These are the people who typically enjoy this. But if you're in business, you're not going away. So quit saying I'm just, taking it away. Like, here's your card. Oh, too late. But I know I really appreciated her and the way she came across saying that, and she was great.
Yeah.
We'll let her know.
Yeah, wonderful.
But I'm going to leave you with our parting words for this week. So as we leave this episode, Nhien, what do you want to remind our listeners?
Well, that I'd rather of course I want you to get my book, but I'd rather you not know the Enneagram than apply the Enneagram without compassion. That's what that is more important than anything. And yeah, so I think that's all I want to say. I have a lot more to say, but this is the way I'll cut myself off to say. Yeah, that if you, from that place, related to that, just because you're still here, I'll just keep talking. There's something I posted recently. It's something I said in a sermon once, but it's like that faith can move mountains, but it's love that makes us want to. And it's love that can dissolve the mountains. And so there's this invitation to access the love within ourselves and to move from that place, and to trust that love can heal as much as that punishing voice attempts to heal and transform not only ourselves, but our world. And so maybe even looking outward as well as inward with that same compassion. Yeah. So
that was perfect. So, No Labels, No Limits podcast listeners, we will be back next week with another guest. And I'm not joking. It would be good to go if you're interested in the Enneagram and you're interested in spiritual work, pre-order. Pre-order now. It's good. You won't have to think about it again. It'll show up when it's available. And you'll say, oh, I bought myself a gift and I forgot it. So take care of that. And then we're going to have a great year in 2025. So let's keep the love flowing, going inward and outward, because we are in a massive global energy change for the good.
You've been listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author, change agent, and strategic business coach, Sarah Boxx. You can grab the show notes and find out how to work with Sarah at sarahboxx.com/No Labels, No Limits podcast. We'd love this podcast to reach as many people as possible. Please remember to rate, leave a 5-star review, and share the podcast with someone you think would get value from this conversation. Till next time, keep Keep taking those daily action steps to align your purpose to your principles and achieve your goals in business and life.